Greetings, dear friends, fellow programmers, and those aspiring to be. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where handling JavaScript asynchronous code is a pain? Well, if you did not, I certainly did. And the only way to overcome it is to master promises in JavaScript. Because after you do that, asynchronous programming is always going to be just a breeze for you. So, let's kick things off by introducing the concept of promises in JavaScript, and also what makes it so essential for web development. First off, as your web applications become increasingly more complicated and handle multiple complex actions, you will benefit astronomically by introducing asynchronous code and basically allow your JavaScript to execute multiple things at the same time, which is as a result going to have a seamless user experience in the end. I hope you already have seen the previous video I posted, which was dedicated to callbacks in JavaScript. And if you did not see that video and you are not very familiar with the concept of callbacks, I highly recommend you to invest a bit of your precious time and see that video, because it's going to be beneficial for you to be able to get the most out of this video. Now that you're familiar with the concept of callbacks in JavaScript, I would like to paint a picture for you. Imagine the scenario where you've been building some application and you were using callbacks to make your code run asynchronously, which is perfectly fine. And you ended up in the situation which is not so desirable. Yeah, I'm talking about callback hell. And that, my friend, is the right situation when you should definitely consider introducing promises and use them instead of callbacks. Because your code is going to be way more easier to read, understand, maintain, expand, and do whatever you like with it, because it will not be nested. It will not be a tangled mess that is a callback hell. So what actually is a promise? In JavaScript, a promise is an object that represents eventual completion or failure of any asynchronous task and its resulting value. You can think of it as a promise you make to your friend. For example, you say to your friend, "I promise I will bring you some coffee." And you have two options basically. If you do bring the cup of coffee to your friend, in that case, the promise you gave him was fulfilled. On the other hand, if you do not do that and do not bring him some coffee, your promise is going to be rejected. And that is exactly how things work in JavaScript promises. It's way simpler to understand it through examples, right? Now, I think is a great moment to discuss actual lifecycle of promises in JavaScript. And there we have just three options. The first one is pending, which is basically your promise was created, but it is still not resolved. We still did not get the result that we are waiting for, and we are still waiting for something. On the other hand, the second is going to be fulfilled, which is basically the happy path for your promise, meaning that you've got the result and everything went well. Or the third option is that your promise was rejected. So the process of waiting for your promise is done. We know that it was completed, but the result was not successfully generated. Or you can say that something went wrong along the way. Now, let me show you in an IDE example with real code. I think it's the best way to solidify what I just tried explaining. I hope I tried explaining it well, but examples in real life are the best way to do it. And here we are in our favorite environment, which is our IDE of choice. And here I have prepared a very simple example for you, where I will try to go through the example I explained in theory with the coffee in code. So let us take a look at the code and what it does. What we have here is a promise. We are creating a new promise, and inside of it we have a variable called coffee ready. And it's a boolean, of course. I set the value to true, meaning that coffee is ready. If that is the case and coffee is ready, we will resolve our promise and return a message which is going to be coffee is ready. On the other hand, if our coffee ready variable is false, we will reject the promise and return no coffee today for you, sir message. So now when that is done and we have explained what coffee promise does, let us go to the part where we are actually going to handle it. So we have two parts. The first one is supposed to handle the happy path, and the other one is supposed to handle sad path. So the first one is going to be the happy path, where we are going to resolve the promise and return a successful result of the execution and handling of the promise, which is basically going to return us a message that we are sending, which is going to be coffee is ready. Or in the other scenario, when we reject the promise, we will again use logging to log an error, but it is going to be inside of a catch block. So whenever your promise is rejected, your code will end up in catch block. If everything went well, it will end up in then statement. I mean, the first then statement. You can chain quite a few there, but I'll show you that in a second. When I run this code, because remember we had a happy path selected, we have coffee ready set to true, we get a message coffee is ready, which is our happy path. Now when I change this to false and save and run the code again, we get a message no coffee today, because we are in the reject statement and we are logging. I can add here just to prove to you that we indeed end up in the catch statement. So we get error, no coffee today. So you know for sure that we are right here. Basically, this was a very simple example which we need to extend, which is exactly what we will do in this video. That's why we are here for, right? Okay, let us head immediately to our second example, where I will expand our current understanding of promises and teach you something you will definitely utilize very often when working with them, which is then statement chaining, because in most situations, you do not have just a single thing that you want to do after your promise was resolved. You want to perform multiple actions that are going to be executed in a certain flow. You do not want to break the flow, you want to execute one thing at a time in exact order you have specified. And to do that, you will use then statement chaining. So let me show you. This right here is our example. We have a very simple promise again, which is going to resolve every time, and in this case it's going to return 10 as a result. And when we chain this then statement to our promise, which is where we will end up because we are resolving it, we are not rejecting our promise, we will end up here and we will log the value that we received, which is 10, we are returning 10. Then we multiply the result by 2 and return it. When we do that, it is basically going to mean this then statement is done executing. You can continue executing whatever else you like. And as you can see here, we have provided another then statement which says, well, right after you are done, first then statement, I need to go next. So this is where we will end up next. And we log our result, which is now going to be 20, because this is the value we are providing from our first then statement. And we log value 20 and return value 20 multiplied by 2 again. And then we say, okay, second then is executed. We are ready to proceed executing the rest of our code, which is when we see that we have another then statement chain, which is where we will end up next. So we end up here, we just print the result, which is the stuff we returned from the second then statement, which is going to be 40. And after that is done, we are actually done. Of course, if anything went wrong, we will end up in this catch statement right here. When I run the code, because everything seems to be working as expected, we get 10, 20, 40, which is exactly what we expected to receive, as you can see here. So that was promise chaining. And as you can see, you have no nesting. If you were using callbacks in this scenario, you would end up with very messy, tangled code, which is not very pleasant to look at, even more so to work with. And I'm still not done with surprises for this video. I have prepared yet another example, which is going to be an extension of our current understanding that we covered in previous video sessions dedicated to our restaurant example. So I'm talking about the restaurant where you as a customer sit down, you order appetizer, main dish and dessert, and you want them to come out in that exact order. You first want to receive appetizer, then you want to receive a main course, and then you want to receive dessert. So this you saw how you can handle with callbacks in previous examples, and in that case you end up with very messy, nested code that is not very nice. Let me show you how that can be done with promises. So we have three main functions here, each one dedicated to creating a certain dish. The first one, order appetizers, which is going to return a new promise, which basically just returns a message in our console. It also creates a timeout because it takes apparently 1 second to make an appetizer, and it resolves it with a message appetizer ready. So that is it. We have exactly the same story for the main course, but this time it takes 2 seconds to make a main dish, and we again log the beginning and also when it is resolved messages. And finally, we have order dessert, which takes 1.5 seconds, so it's like in the middle. And we also log both messages as well. So when we know this, we can proceed to the part where we invoke and we handle these promises. How that is going to work is we first invoke our order appetizer, because that is the first thing we want to do when a customer sits down and orders. And when that is resolved, we're going to receive a message, which is going to be appetizer ready, and we log that message, immediately chaining ordering main course to that pipeline, because that is the next step that needs to be executed. When that is done, we are going to enter into our second then statement, which is basically going to be entered when our order main course is done executing. And we receive the message, we log it, and then we start the process of ordering a dessert. And when that promise is also resolved, we will just log the message we received and say everything went well, all the courses were served in timely manner. Of course, if anything goes wrong, we log an error message. So when I run this code, we should see ordering appetizer is ready 1 second after it was ordered. Then we ordered the main course, then 2 seconds later it was done. Then we ordered the dessert, then 1.5 seconds after that, dessert was ready, and then we just say all courses are ready. So this right here is the exact flow that we expected to receive, and it is the same as the one we had with callbacks. But this time we have no nesting, and it's way easier to look at this code, and not to mention how easier it is to understand it. So this was everything when it comes to examples that I have prepared for you in this video. Basically, what we can say after seeing all of those examples is that when we are using promises, we are executing our asynchronous code sequentially, meaning it will be much easier to understand the code, and also we will make it way more efficient. To wrap things up, in conclusion, utilizing promises in JavaScript allows a plethora of benefits for you, because you will be able to write way cleaner, easier to understand code, even like when you say that it's easier to maintain it, extend it, do whatever you like with it because you will understand it easier. and you will have easier time navigating the code, and also you will gain the performance benefits of utilizing asynchronous execution of your code. So it's a win-win situation, you may say. Before we wrap things up, I would just like to encourage you to practice the stuff you've heard in this video, because that is the best way to ensure that everything will stick around with your brain and you will actually master the concept and be able to use it in action in real life whenever you stumble upon a situation where it would be beneficial to use promises. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. I invite you to do so. You're very welcome here, because a lot of very useful topics will be addressed on this channel in the near future. So, thank you for watching and have an amazing day. Keep coding!